All right, Elliot, here we go. So 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. All right, folks, welcome back to the podcast. I'm very excited to have as my guest today, Elliott Connie. Elliott, welcome.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right, really excited to meet you and talk with you. So Elliott is a Texas-based psychotherapist in private practice and the founder-director of the Solution Focused University, an online learning community that trains and provides resources for professionals who want to master the solution-focused approach in their work. Over the course of his 15-year clinical career, Elliott has successfully worked with thousands of individuals, couples, and families using the solution-focused model to help them achieve their desired outcomes. He's an experienced speaker who's gained international recognition for training hundreds of practitioners throughout the US, Australia, Europe, and Asia on the solution-focused treatment model. He's the author and co-author of 4 books, among them including Solution-Focused Brief Therapy with Clients Managing Trauma and the Solution-Focused Marriage, 5 Simple Habits that will bring out the best in your relationship. Elliott, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, man. So before we get going, share with our listeners where you're from originally and where you are currently.
I'm originally, so I was born in Chicago and my first few years were spent there. I consider Boston, Massachusetts my hometown because that's where I was raised, just outside of Boston. And I now live in Arlington, Texas, but I'm more of a citizen of the world because I travel a lot teaching people and working on a television project. I'm actually out here in LA right now as we record this podcast, working on a TV project. So that's my journey so far.
Okay, well, excited to hear about that. So how did this start for you? This interest in solution-focused therapy, and seems like you're doing a lot of stuff, but how did that start?
It started with pain, actually. Like I had a really traumatic childhood. My father was a very angry, upset man, and he would take out his anger and upset on his family. And I spent the majority of my childhood really anxious and depressed and really like riddled with fear. And somehow I knew that this is not how life should be lived, but I didn't know what to do about it. I ultimately decided to take my life. I was 19. And I genuinely was like, I'm out. Like, I wasn't thinking about it. I wasn't considering. I had decided that this is what I'm going to do. And I remember one day I was laying in my college dorm room. I was 19 years old and I had for real decided to go. And for some reason, I started thinking about my eulogy. I started thinking about like, who would eulogize me and how would they eulogize me and how would my friends and the people that know me, how would they respond to the end of my life? And I kept in my head, I kept thinking of all my friends being like sad, and we didn't know Elliott was this troubled, and we didn't know Elliott was this sad, and we didn't know Elliott was this, in pain. And for some reason, I couldn't live with that because what bothered me was everybody would be talking about what was wrong with me, and I wanted them to talk about what was wrong with my father. Like I somehow that the incongruence of the reality versus the message, I couldn't live with. So I decided I need to figure out a way to outlive this pain so I could tell that truth, which was crazy, but that's what I was thinking at the time. I switched my major from marine biology to psychology.
After
the next day.
Wow.
I went and switched my major to from marine biology to psychology. I never imagined like I'd get a master's degree and become a psychotherapist to write books. I was just literally trying to understand my own psyche. And I thought an undergrad in psychology would help me do that. Then when I graduated and I went into the field, I learned probably the most important lesson I could ever learn, which is when your pain has a purpose, it's not pain anymore, it's a mission. And when I got into the field, I was like a caseworker. I mean, not anything crazy or high status or making a lot of money or anything like that. But I was working with people and I realized I could connect with them because I had my own story too. And it made me want to be a psychotherapist. And I was so excited about it. I just thought how cool I could actually do a job where I could go and help people. Like, this is going to be amazing. Then I went to graduate school and I realized they're not teaching me how to help people. And it really frustrated me. They were teaching me how to diagnose. They were teaching me how to focus on problems. And all I could think about was suicidal, anxious, depressed Elliott Connie as a youth. And I thought I wouldn't want to talk to anybody about the pain and trauma. Number one, it's a hard thing for people to it's a hard thing for people to understand and comprehend. But number two, it takes me to a dark place to be able to even participate in those conversations. So I just thought, I don't want to do this if this is all it's about.
Mm.
And then one day, man, I was about a year in, and I took a class where like the course book was about all the general theories, like every chapter was a different theory. And I remember reading 2 pages about solution focused brief therapy. And it was so in line with who I wanted to be as a person. It was about hope and change, that I was like, this is the only way I could do this job. And I'm not here to say that solution focused brief therapy is better than other types of therapy or anything like that, but I am saying I couldn't imagine spending my career talking to people about their faults and their flaws and their problems. I didn't want anybody talking to me about mine. Not that I don't mind sharing them. Obviously, I share them in books and on stages, even in this interview now. But it's such a horrible thing for someone to go into your life and start like picking at those wounds.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't imagine doing it to somebody. And then I found there was this other way of doing therapy where I didn't have to do that. And I was like, man, this is how I want to be. And I learned that not a lot of people knew what solution focused brief therapy was. And I thought that was crazy. So I started writing books and traveling, giving lectures, and just doing my thing.
Oh my God. Thank you so much for sharing that. That is so intense. I mean, that moment where, you know, you said you were going to take your life, and you were thinking about your eulogy, and you're like, wait a minute, they're talking about all this, this horrible stuff that happened with me. What about
Yeah.
that's such a poignant moment. That's such an insight. Had that been coming up for you at all prior to that?
No, the only thing I could think about prior to that was like, this pain has got to go away. Like, this fear has got to go away. I felt tormented by my own mind. And after, I mean, if I'm being fully honest, after I decided, like, okay, I got to take my life, I experienced a sense of relief because I knew the pain would be over. And I was just laying in my dorm room one day thinking what it'll be like after I'm gone. And I just couldn't live with everybody thinking I'm gone because I have a flaw. I wanted them to understand that he has a flaw.
Mm-hmm.
And that flaw has impacted my life in a serious way. And there was only a few people that were very, very close to me that knew, but everybody else was, I mean, and think about it. When someone loses their life to suicide, we always think, oh, I didn't know they were going through such pain, and I didn't know they were struggling, but it's always about that person. But you don't know, there might have been someone in their life tormenting them. And then for me, it was my father. It was an absolute torment of a childhood. Mm-hmm. And one of the things that frustrated me is when you live with someone who's angry to that degree, to that frequency, people think about abuse as in instances like your father came home from work on Friday night really angry and beat you up. So you got beaten up on Friday. So that was the abuse. Mm-hmm. But the truth is the abuse takes place every single second of every single day, because every single second and every single day is a day I could be abused. So it's constantly on my mind. Mm. The example I give people, if I locked you in a room with a ferocious, hungry lion, you're not just in danger when the lion is attacking you. You are fearful every single second of being locked in that room. And that was my childhood. At any moment, this lion could turn on me and attack me viciously. So it was a childhood full of fear and anxiety, absence of control and depression. And I wanted people to know that. I wanted people to know, yeah, I'm not a great student, but you wouldn't be either if you were having your ass kicked at home every day. Mm-hmm. I wanted people to know that, yeah, I'm not a super outgoing person, but you wouldn't be either if you had to deal with all this stuff. And I wanted people to know, like, yeah, I'm not overly happy or fun to be around, but you wouldn't be either. And I didn't want people to say, like, he's not alive because there's something wrong with him. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I couldn't live with that. And I made the decision in that moment to outlive this pain.
That's incredible. So let's talk a little bit more about what solution focused therapy, brief therapy is. Because it is, I was reading up on it. I mean, I knew obviously a little bit about it, but not a lot. And it's just so, you read it, you read about it, you're like, well, of course we should be doing this. And of course, this feels amazing. But a lot of people, most of the profession isn't.
No,
So
no.
break it down for us. What is it?
So solution focused brief therapy is a focus on an outcome you hope to achieve in your life. That's probably the most succinct way I can describe this therapy. It's the kind of therapy that focuses on an outcome a client wants to achieve in their life. Most therapy is about a problem that you want to solve, and or what you want to talk about in this session. We refer to that oftentimes in our field as processing, like what you want to process in this session. But solution focused brief therapy is much more, what outcome do you hope to achieve in your life? And the easiest example I can give to you, the other day I was driving down the street and I saw a big old billboard that said the lottery had reached $1.4 billion, which someone has now won. I think they're in Florida, but someone has now won $1.4 billion. And if I ask anyone, would you like to win $1.4 billion? They would say, yeah, sure, of course. I would love to have $1.4 billion. But I would argue that it's not the money that you want, it's the thing that you get from having the money that you want. Mm-hmm. So if you gave me $1.4 billion, that's actually just useless. If you put it in a suitcase, I mean, it'd have to be a big old suitcase, I guess, but if you put it in a big old suitcase and you handed it to me, this is only valuable because I can turn it into something else. Like I can go get a car, I can buy a house, I can buy my mom a house, I can put it in a savings account, I can do things with it. Mm. Well, therapy for us is kind of similar. A client will come into our office and we'll ask them about the outcome they want to achieve. Most often the way we do that is by asking, what are your best hopes from our talking? And a client might say, I don't want to be depressed anymore. And we start thinking, so that what? Like, so that what becomes of you? We'll say, what would you like to be instead? I'd like to be happy. And what would happiness be doing in your life? And it's just like, what would $1.4 billion do in my life? I would be able to pay off these things and buy these things and have these kinds of travel experiences or whatever. Well, when someone starts telling me they want to be happy, it's kind of like, I want to win $1.4 billion. And my job as the clinician is to say, so that what? Like, then what would happen? Well, then I'd be a better dad. I'd be a better mom. I'd be a better psychotherapist. I'd be a better author. I'd be a better whatever it would be. And when you engage people in conversations like that, it becomes so much more fruitful and powerful than talking about a problem. That I don't understand why so many people in this field, actually, that's not true. I have a theory as why so many people in this field don't get it. But for me, it lights my soul on fire.
Right. So rather than digging into the depression, digging into what caused it, digging into the many things that surround that, immediately you're turned in a different direction, which ignites the thought processes of that person into a whole different direction. Very positive. Right. And very enlightening and very inspiring.
Correct.
But before we go on here, what is your theory about why a lot of people don't?
I think my biggest theory is because it runs counter to our belief that like more therapy is more good. Mm-hmm. So like if someone has depression, like the more intense the therapy, the better the outcomes would be. For some reason, we just kind of hold that as the default belief. So anything absent that seems unusual and difficult for therapists to buy in. Like I get a lot of comments to my events on my social media. People literally like, no good therapist would ever say the thing you just said. And I'm like, what? Like I might say something like every human being has skills. And then people get mad at me. Well, what about those clients who don't have any skills and I have to teach them? If you believe that a human being doesn't have any skills, you have no right to be in their life, especially as a psychotherapist. You have to really hold the belief that every single human being has skills. And I don't understand why that's such a like insane belief. But it is reasonable to me to assume that everybody has skills. It is reasonable to me to assume that everybody has resilience, but it runs counter to our previously held notions for some reason, and I don't get it.
Just want to remind everyone, I'm speaking with Elliott Connie. He is the founder director of the Solution Focused University, as well as author. We'll have everything linked up at the show notes page here. So, before we talk about the many things you're doing, I'm really curious, Elliott. After you took that course in solution focused therapy, you were kind of on fire. How did things unfold for you after that? How did your whole state morph and change and evolve?
Well, I think two things. I got really passionate, seems like such a cliche word, but I got really, really passionate. I started thinking about clients that couldn't afford therapy. At the time, I was like late in my master's program. I'd spent about a year since I learned about this approach, really like working and honing my skills and understanding this way of working. And I got an internship where the therapist there had to do cognitive behavioral therapy. And I didn't want to do it, but I needed an internship. And they were like, you have to get your clients to commit to 18 therapy sessions, minimum 18 therapy sessions. And then if a client didn't show up, it was almost like they were ridiculing them without realizing they were doing it. Like that client wasn't motivated, wasn't ready, they're not committed. But I couldn't help but think about my mother, who was a single mom, married to someone who wasn't super kind. They went through like a 20-year divorce, and she had to take care of me and my two brothers. And me and my two brothers were a bit of a handful, both pragmatically, like we were all playing sports and had after school activities going in 1,000 different directions. And we were, at least two of the three of us, were mischievous. If you told my mother that she had to bring one of or all three of her children to weekly therapy for a minimum of 18 weeks, that's an incredibly difficult achievement for her, let alone can she financially achieve it, afford it. But even if she could, rounding her three children up weekly for a minimum of 18 weeks is almost an unrealistic goal. And if you have the audacity, excuse me, to criticize my mother's motivation or commitment because she couldn't achieve that unrealistic aim, that is unbelievably disrespectful. So I started thinking more people in this world needed to learn about solution focused brief therapy simply so more people could benefit from having access to therapy without being ridiculed. I think people, if all you can do is gather your family to come to therapy one time, then it's my job to make that one time as effective and efficient as possible. And I couldn't live with this idea that if someone doesn't come to therapy, we get to make fun of them, that they're not committed, they're not a good mom, they're not a good whatever. I was just like, this is insane. Someone needs to stand up and make this more known. And I think the other thing it made me do was, and I don't mean this to sound as disrespectful as it's going to sound, I genuinely don't. But I started reading books about solution focused brief therapy and going to workshops and conferences, and I didn't like them. I didn't think they were written in a way that honored this work, and I didn't think they were personal enough. So I decided to write a book. I was just like, well, I'm not. It's not fair for me to think that everybody else's work is. So I need to write a book. So I wrote a book, and then people started asking me to travel around the world and give lectures, and it hasn't really stopped.
What inspired you to create and found the Solution Focused University?
Um, well, two things. Racism, because not everybody in our field was super excited about a Black man becoming a loud voice in this field. And I felt like I needed a community where I felt safe.
Mm.
So I created an online community, an online space where I felt safe. And I think the second thing connected to that was I thought other people needed a community where they felt safe too. And a lot of times, like when you tell your peers and colleagues that you're doing solution focused brief therapy, they would criticize you and Like, my professor told me that's a Band-Aid approach, so thus you're not ethical. Like, so I wanted to create a community where people could feel safe on multiple fronts, but even just like, I feel like I'm safe just to pursue mastery of this way of working.
It's crazy, and it's um disheartening to think that in the field that seems to be the outlook on solutions focused therapy. And yet, you know, when we think about uh our own skills, our own hopes, and realize the different direction we're going in, rather than focusing on the problem and trying to diagnose ourselves or be diagnosed. It's a 180 approach. You know, it's a 180 dichotomy.
Right, but it's not a 180 in almost every other area. Like, if you wanted to learn how to run hurdles, they actually teach you not to look at the hurdle. And when you ask a track coach, why not? And they will all tell you, because when you look at an obstacle, you will trip over it. Well, that's true for life. We also don't make the assumption that more services is more good. Like, you wouldn't go to your dentist every week. You wouldn't say, oh, I had a great dentist appointment, I'm going to go back next week to make sure you wouldn't do that. But like, so outside the context of therapy, the beliefs we have about therapy are actually quite unusual, right? But in therapy, we have these weird beliefs. And you know, I'm very proud of the fact that the Solution Focused Universe has become the largest training organization in the world, and working very hard to kind of normalize this unusual way in which we do this work.
So what else do you have going on? First of all, what's the best way for people to get in contact with you?
The best way for people to get in contact with me is probably my website, ElliottConnie.com. Make sure you spell it with 2 L's and 2 T's. And anywhere on social media. Elliott Speaks on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Those are probably the best ways to get a hold of me, and I would love to be able to interact with people.
Okay, we'll have those linked up again. But you have a lot going on. I mean, before we started recording, you were like, I've got a TV show production. What's going on with that? Can you talk about that?
Yeah. So first of all, my most recent book, called The Solution Focused Brief Therapy Diamond, was just released earlier this year. I signed a TV deal not too long ago, and it's going to be executive produced by a woman named Tiffany Haddish, who
Wow.
Yeah, most people know Tiffany.
How did that come about? And what's it about?
Well, it's crazy. Somebody saw some of my social media content, somebody out here in LA, and they said they wanted to make a TV show about my work. And I was like, wow, that's really cool. So we started working on it. We're about 6 months in, and then Tiffany Haddish got wind of me and what I did, and she told my producers that she wanted to meet me. And after meeting, she contacted my producers and said she wanted to executive produce my show.
Jeez.
So we worked it out. So now Tiffany is like officially, Tiffany and her production company are going to be co-producing my TV project. And it's really about how amazing humans are, I think. It's probably the best way I can describe it. Like, in a simplistic way, it's about me doing solution-focused things, like, with people. But really, it's about how amazing human beings are, and I get to meet a whole bunch of people and let it shine how great they are, and that human beings can overcome just about anything.
Wow. Well, first of all, congratulations. I mean, talking about the lottery, that is incredible. So it's kind of like a reality thing where they're following you, interacting with people, doing the solution focus.
Yeah.
Wow. Amazing. When are we going to see that?
I can't say. I'm not allowed. But it's getting close. I can't say that. It's getting close.
All right. Well, look, wow. Amazing. Dude, you're so inspiring. You really are. I mean, I really appreciate you sharing that early story. And yeah, I mean, it's very intense, obviously, but what came out of that is, I'm just so honored to meet you, and excited to share this with my audience. Really appreciate you coming on here.
Thanks for having me, man. I appreciate it as well.
Yeah. All right. We'll be in touch. And again, we'll have everything linked up at the show notes page on the podcast. All right, Elliott. Take care.
See ya.